Hello, my name is Charlotte Horling. Today's lecture is one of 5 lectures that focus on early Korean exhibition culture and collecting practices. We will focus on the establishment of museums in Korea in the early 20th century. The founding of museums in Korea followed trends seen elsewhere in America, Europe, and Japan, where major museums were founded with government support in the aim to educate and inspire the general public. In Europe and America, the public investment in such institutions were rooted in the Enlightenment, with its emphasis on reason, knowledge, and public education laid the groundwork for the establishment of museums as institutions for the public good. Thinkers of the time believed that access to art, science, and history could foster civic virtues and informed citizenship. The British Museum in London is the earliest and most well-known example of a national public museum. It was founded in 1753 and opened its doors in 1759. I'm sure that many of you have visited the museum and seen its famous collections spanning Egyptian mummies, Greek vases, Indian miniature paintings, and many more objects. The museum also has one of the largest collections of Korean art in the UK that it began to acquire in the late 19th century. I encourage you to visit the Korea Foundation Gallery of Korean Art, which opened at the British Museum more than 20 years ago. Over the course of the 18th and 19th centuries, several other nations followed the British exemplar and opened similar large-scale museums that aimed to educate the public. In 1872, the Tokyo National Museum opened in Tokyo. Its establishment during the early Meiji era formed part of the Japanese government's strategies aimed at rapid modernization and westernization. The museum was initially founded to promote the understanding of Japanese culture and to showcase artifacts that represented the country's history and heritage. In this lecture, we will look at how museums in Seoul and elsewhere in the peninsula played a crucial role in making Korean artifacts accessible to the Korean public. In comparison to Europe, America, and Japan, the establishment of museums in Korea came relatively late. Yet, many parallels can be drawn between Korea and those regions in terms of how public access to art fundamentally changed the ways in which art could be seen and enjoyed by people of all backgrounds and social classes. Until the early 20th century, it was only elite members of Korean society who had access to art. Typically, there were members of the Joseon royal family and the Yangban class who had collected and commissioned artworks by local and foreign artists, and they displayed the artifacts they owned in their private residences. Access to those collections was restricted to family members, guests, and sometimes scholars or artists with special permission. This situation was like that of Europe and America. A case in point is Prince Anpyeong's large collection of calligraphy and paintings made by Chinese and Korean masters that are mentioned in an earlier lecture. In the 15th century, when the prince lived, it was the largest collection of art in Korea. Close friends of the prince were granted access to the collection, as did the painter An, who frequently produced paintings for the prince. The collection had significant impact on An, who emulated the painting style of the Chinese masters whose works he closely studied. Since An was a much admired painter during this time, his painting style inspired many other Korean painters. In this way, Prince Anpyeong's collection significantly shaped the Korean cultural environment. During the Joseon Dynasty, paintings and other artworks continued to be admired and studied, but typically within exclusive networks of individuals who belonged to the elite ranks of Joseon society. For this reason, the opening of museums in Seoul in the early 20th century marked an important change to the ways in which art could be seen and enjoyed. The first museum to open in Korea was the Imperial Household Museum, Chesil Bakmulgwan. In 1911, following the Japanese annexation of Korea, it was renamed the Prince E Household Museum, 이 왕가 박물관. The museum was established in 1908 and opened to the public in November 1909. Contrary to its name, the museum numbered only few artifacts from the Royal Historic Collections. Many of the paintings and written documents in court ownership had been lost, while ceramics and other locally manufactured utilitarian objects had traditionally not been appreciated as art and were therefore not formally collected. Instead, from the inception of the museum in January 1908 to its grand inauguration the following year, more than 8,000 artifacts were acquired locally by museum staff, all of whom were Japanese. By 1912, the collection had grown to more than 12,000 items, comprising a vast array of secular and religious artifacts of different materials. The collection was initially displayed in a building which was constructed within Changgyeonggun Palace in Seoul. As you can see on this image, the building deviates significantly from typical Joseon architecture. First of all, it was made of bricks, in contrast to wood, which was the main material of palace buildings. Yet its curved roofs are reminiscent of those found on other buildings within Korean palaces, suggesting a deliberate merger between Western and Korean architectural traditions. During the colonial period, many postcards were printed with images of the building, no doubt because it was regarded as a modern, novel, as well as beautiful building. The second museum to be established in Korea was the Government General Museum of Korea. It opened in December 1915 and was located within the precincts of Gyeongbokgung Palace. From its inception, the museum replaced the Prince E Household Museum as the most significant cultural institution within Korea. The reason why it occupied such an important role within Korea was because it became the official home for artifacts excavated and surveyed by Japanese archaeologists over the course of the colonial period. Among such artifacts were Buddhist sculptures, ceramics, and archaeological remains, among many others. The colonial Japanese government's investment in its cultural activities was manifested in the location of the museum within the main palace in Seoul, its imposing size and modern Western-style architecture, not to mention its collection and display methods. As in the case of the Prince E Household Museum, many postcards were made depicting the museum. Here we see the large two-story building with its resplendent columns within the palace grounds. In front of the building was a Western-style garden with lawns and small bushes. The building was designed by the Japanese architect Nomura Ichiro and opened in 1926. Nomura Ichiro was a prominent architect during this period and was responsible for several key architectural projects in Korea under Japanese rule. After Korea's liberation, the building was used for various purposes until it was eventually demolished in the 1990s as part of efforts to restore Gyeongbokgung Palace to its original state. Inside the building, the objects were displayed in ornately carved wooden cabinets. Here you see examples of the museum's collection of Celadon ceramics from the Goryeo dynasty. These objects were extremely popular among collectors of this time, as I mentioned in my previous lecture. The collections of the Prince E Household Museum and the Government General Museum of Korea all focused on archaeological material and other types of objects from Korea's past. No artifacts of contemporary make were collected. In the first decades of the 20th century, there was little opportunity for Koreans to see examples of contemporary art, such as oil paintings and other works by contemporary artists. This changed in 1921, when the Government General established the Joseon Art Exhibition. This was not a museum, but a government-run exhibition which was held annually in Seoul. It invited contemporary artists to submit works which were then assessed by a jury. Those works that passed the jurors' scrutiny were included in the exhibition, and the best examples were awarded prizes. During the colonial period, the Chosun Art Exhibition came to be the most important avenue through which Korean artists could debut their work and gain official recognition. Over the years, the exhibition became more and more competitive as an increasing number of artists submitted works to the exhibition. Having one's artwork selected for the exhibition and to be nominated for a prize was a huge honor and enabled artists to establish themselves in the field. The exhibition was initially divided into 4 sections termed in Korean Dongyang-hwa, literally Eastern painting, Soyang-hwa, literally Western painting, Soye, calligraphy, and Chogak, sculpture. Later, a crafts section, Gongye, was added and the calligraphy section was closed. The terms Dongyang-hwa and Soyang-hwa continue to be used in Korea today to mark the distinction between the traditional East Asian medium of ink and the Western medium of oil on canvas. As mentioned in my first lecture, the latter was introduced to Korea in the 19th century. However, the Chosun Art Exhibition was not the only avenue through which artists could display their works, though it did become the most influential. In the 1920s, independent exhibitions organized by Koreans were also staged in Seoul and elsewhere on the peninsula, notably in Daegu and Pyongyang. Also noteworthy was the Hyopjan. As in the case of the Chosun Art Exhibition, this was an annual exhibition. However, it was independent from the government as it was organized by the Association of Calligraphy and Painting. It opened in 1921 and ran annually until 1936. One of its key aims was to promote art that expressed national spirit, as for example, represented through the execution of the traditional Korean medium of ink. This lecture has examined how art became accessible to the public during the early 20th century through the establishment of museums and temporary exhibitions. The legacy of such museums and exhibitions is felt in Korea today. In 1945, the Government General Museum of Korea became what is now known as the National Museum of Korea. A significant part of its collection derives from the Prince E Household Museum, which was similarly reformulated following the end of the Chosun colonial rule in 1945. Following the end of the Korean War in 1953, the South Korean government established a juried exhibition for contemporary artists, and its setup was similar to that of the Chosun Art Exhibition. I hope that these lectures have presented you with insights into exhibition culture and collecting practices in early modern Korea. Hopefully you will want to know more, and I encourage you to consult the references listed here and to watch the other lectures that form part of this course. Thank you.